This episode is about minutes 16 through 20 of The Empire Strikes Back with brand new guest, Dr. Jenn Harding. Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Xanthe Tan, you can call me Xanthe, and today is all about minutes 16 through 20 of The Empire Strikes Back, which starts with the Rebel pilot searching for Luke and Han on multiple snowspeeders, and ends with General Riken ordering the Rebel evacuation. I'm really excited today to have music theorist, educator, violinist, Dr. Jenn Harding on the show. Hello, Jenn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this.
I don't know how I remembered that you were a Star Wars fan. I can't remember if I just saw it on Twitter, but I think I've known it since we were kids. I think I've
probably
known that. Yeah.
We probably talked about it at some point during rehearsal break.
I'm sure. Yeah. So it's, for those listening, I reconnected with Jenn on Twitter because music theory Twitter. I don't know. I don't know how that happened.
I think you just find people the good people keep surfacing.
I think Frank Lehman was our mutual, maybe.
That sounds very plausible.
And so he's like the link to Star Wars music theory people. So I was like, Jenn, we were stand partners.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Anyway, and now you're like a fancy music theorist, and I'm very excited to talk to you about The Empire Strikes Back, which is a monumental score.
It is huge. It is huge. There is so much going on, so much little intricate detail to pick apart.
Yeah, and I feel like this is kind of it feels like a more difficult score to talk about than A New Hope, which we did a couple seasons ago. And I mean, that was difficult because just of the historical significance of it, the historic significance, but it felt like each of the cues had a more obvious reference or Rite of Spring or the planets. So those conversations are a little bit less applicable to this score.
So do you sense that The Empire Strikes Back score stands more on its own and is more self-referential in that sense?
Yes. Or I think I think John Williams' influences are still present throughout all of his scores, but it doesn't feel as, the ratio doesn't feel as it's not as one-to-one. Clearly this was temp tracked with Rite of Spring, or clearly this was a temp track. It feels less, a little bit less of a temp track situation. Although I will say there still are some very clear, if we talk about the Imperial March, there is some very clear material that it seems inspired by, for sure. But I think overall, especially in the underscore, I feel like it deviates from Star Wars. From A New Hope, a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it's more connected to Return of the Jedi coming up? Or?
I don't feel confident answering that yet because I have an emotional memory of Return of the Jedi. But something I've learned from doing this podcast is that I think I know Star Wars really, really well, and then I go through it 5 minutes at a time, and I sort of am humbled by how many details that
I had no idea that was there.
Yeah.
In just this clip, listening to this, I had no idea how much music was in this 5 minutes until I started listening to this clip over and over.
Yeah. That's probably a good segue for us to start listening to this clip. I'm just going to start playing right here from the beginning of minute 16. You can hear all the wind and stuff there. So this is the pilots on their snowspeeders.
Echo base.
searching for Luke and Han the next morning. Already, I feel like so much has happened sonically.
Yes.
What are you picking up on
Absolutely.
here? What do you notice?
So first, if we could start like before the speeders come in at the very, very end of that previous scene, where it's about to disappear into the snow.
Okay, yes.
And all that. I just, yeah.
Like here?
Yeah, I love the way that the wind comes in over the strings, and then the flute and oboe have a line coming down, but it just gets completely overtaken by the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this, you mean like the strings have that kind of wispy... Yeah,
That little oscillation thing that's
Yeah.
climbing upward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like the sort of like crossfade is present a lot in just that clip that we heard, both there and also like when the, you know, comes in.
Yeah.
I feel like it comes in like soft and gets turned up.
Underneath. And that's fascinating. And it happens later in the clip too, when the music comes out, when we're and I'm getting ahead of myself, in the medical facility.
That's okay, yeah.
But this crossfade, and one of the things I'm really curious about is the sound design, how the sounds, the ambient sounds almost seem to be tuned to what the music is doing, or maybe the music is tuned to the sound effects, and how that crossfade just works really seamlessly in that regard.
Yeah, I think something really interesting about, one of the main things that I noticed about the sound design here is how, quote unquote, musical it sounds. Like it really, like if we just go back and listen to, you know, it's like a tone.
Yes.
I'm curious how that was made to. I'm curious as well how like deliberate that sort of thing is, because it happens all over the place with like Ben Burtt's sound design, especially where things really sound musical. They really sound musical.
Right. And that is a fascinating aspect. And it puts the sound design in kind of this liminal space of what is the music and what is just sound effect. And at some point, is there actually a difference between those two?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's very interesting.
I mean,
liminal
clearly
space
there is
a great way.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Clearly, but like liminal space is an interesting way to put that. It's a really good way to put it, because I feel like that's exactly how it feels. Like, I mean, I guess it's easy to get, or people often are asked, it's a common question, like, what's the difference between music and sound design? Like, doesn't matter. Like, where is that line? Like, where's that line, basically? And aside from the obvious answer of like, well, two different roles, right? Two different departments are doing those, like, aside from that, when we're hearing, I guess that doesn't really matter because it's all mixed into the soundscape that we hear, like the ultimate mix.
Right.
But I wonder if like the musicality of some of these sounds, and I do have some notes on like how a lot of these sounds are made. So I'll read that in a second from a Ben Burtt interview. But a lot of things are were recorded from very clear source material rather than just purely like synthesized from, starting with white noise and crafting it, putting filters on it, which happens sometimes, and especially in the newer movies. But especially back in the day, there was a lot of like sampling of stuff and then playing around with stuff. However, the Snowspeeders, I do have an answer for like kind of why it sounds so musical. So in an interview, Ben Burtt has said that the Snowspeeders are derived from aircraft sounds run through a harmonizer.
Aha!
There we go, right? One of the very first digital devices, he says, which had the ability to produce a tonality that would rise and fall in pitch as if it were a Doppler effect, the sound made by something in motion, By running the aircraft recordings through this primitive harmonizer, they were able to get the basic sound of the Snowspeeders. And then the sharpest parts of the pass-bys for the Snowspeeders were, quote, sweetened with a cougar snarl. Animal
No
sounds,
way.
yeah, animal sounds, being organic and also expressive, having emotions associated with them, are always useful even for inorganic objects, be they spaceships or doors or equipment. So, yeah.
Cool. I had no idea. Do you know where exactly the cougar sound comes in?
That's a great
Want to
question.
find it.
I guess we can guess, but like the harmonizer is very obvious,
Right.
and I like. My guess is that we'll hear some of the cougar snarling later, but also within these minutes. Let's see.
Echo base.
I like the word sweetened, though.
Not much,
Yes.
but it could be a life form.
Like maybe that? Like maybe that. Oh, I think I can hear that. Like when it's like, and it gets.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. I think it's pretty cool, too. And then, for the record, the snow. Some of the snow was created by recording surf on the ocean side.
Okay.
Yeah. He says, if you lay down a track of the surf and then occasionally swelled it up and down as if there were a gust of wind, you got a sound which read as swirling snow.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll buy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that someone has footage of him explaining these sounds because it's very fascinating to guess and then see what the actual like answer is.
Right. And then the visual stimulus is so overwhelming. When I see the image of the snow, I'm not going to think surf. When I see the image of the speeders, I'm certainly not going to think cougar. Though I may think like
now
those
you
other
will.
aircraft. Well, I know now I will. I'm never going to unsee that anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. I'm trying to find like another great quote that he has that kind of refers to what you were saying with like the visual stimulus being so important. Okay, right. Okay. So he has wind is another thing that he has explained. But before then, he has this sort of meta statement, which Ben Burtt says, and I quote, "You most often get the proper sound by recording something that is not the actual literal device in question. Sometimes even just running a pencil down a piece of rough canvas and re-miking it closely gives you a beautiful sound of wind." So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I've seen videos of sound designers like doing all kinds of crazy stuff to generate all the sounds that are going to be then processed and used and whatnot. And the amount of creativity and just experimentation is astounding.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely. Where were we? Oh my gosh, there was so much that was happening.
Sure.
Shall we talk about some of the music, or do you want to listen to
Yeah.
a little bit, get into it a little bit more?
Maybe right when the strings come in after the speeders are going.
I love when the strings come in. Yeah, let's do that. Oh wait, let me back up a little bit. With that sort of fade in.
Yeah.
Echo base.
And then they're up a perfect
Got
fifth.
something. Not much, but it could be a life form.
You can tell me to pause at any time.
Move down. Sure. Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about what's happened so far. So we start out in B minor.
B flat.
Yeah, B flat minor. Sorry. I am actually playing.
Yeah,
B
you're
flat
playing it right. Yeah.
So B flat minor, and then it arpeggiates up, and we head up to F. Is it true that this bit of score? I watched through Empire Strikes Back the other day, and I only heard this one other time in the movie. It was the escape from Bespin. Later on at the very end.
Well, it does show up there.
Well, right. But I think, as far as I could tell, those were the only two times that it shows up.
That's as far as I know so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it sounds like, what strikes me is that it sounds like really, really familiar in a way. Like it sounds like it's something that comes up way more. Like in fact,
Right, but
I was searching, just like, where else has this come up? Like surely this has come up tons of times already. In A New Hope, maybe. And I think I just was mixing it up with something else. I'm not sure.
right. Well, there's something very, very familiar about this motor type of sound, this kind of chugging
Yes.
along the almost a perpetual motion type of feel. Yeah, that even if this is the first time we've heard it in the franchise, is familiar enough to give that
That's a good
sense
point.
of, oh, I've heard that before. Yeah.
That is a really good point, because I think I think what it reminds me of is just something in that motor category. And and I think something aboard I think it reminds me of like an Imperial thing for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, I could hear that.
I'm trying to, okay, let's see. Like there is something like, there is something like with stormtroopers that goes like, but, and I know that this is more like double time, but let's see, there's also something, I'm like kind of looking at notes from A New Hope season because there's like, okay, there's Imperial troops, ostinato. No, that's what that was. There's it's not the martial rhythm. Imperial cruiser pursuit maybe? No, I don't know. But again, it's just sort of like these almost ostinato type figures where they're, I don't know how else to describe it. Frank Lehman, please tell us what we're missing. But so my fingers on this pulse. Yeah.
Right. And what was fascinating to me here is when other things besides the motor come in, or when the pitch of the motor changes, and it's always related to the text, to the lines being said, and kind of the progression of the story of this segment.
By the way, I think the thing that most reminds me of is like, it's hard to do it just on the violin because I'm imagining like a heavy percussion element.
Sure.
Like, in A New Hope, it's like do 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 do. But anyway, I don't know. Listeners, what do you think? But yeah, you're right. Like it kind of goes up, and then it doesn't just go up like a perfect fifth. It then like goes back down, and then it goes up again. It kind of it changes the level suddenly several times.
Right. So we start off on that B flat minor, and then we jump up to F. And then right around when it says the echo bass, I've got something, that's the first time we hear the horns come in, the kind of the fanfare announcing that they found some. That run happens right before the next line. So first we get the sustained call in the horns, and right before the next line, which is the Commander Skywalker, do you copy? That's when we get the from the trumpets.
Totally. Yeah. You're so right.
And then there, it moves to D minor from there.
Wait, let me play this so we can put it in context. Okay. So here we're still in
B flat.
Turning it up.
Not much, but it could be a life form.
Trumpet.
Commander Skywalker, do you copy? This is Rogue 2.
Now the key change.
Rogue 2. Captain Solo.
Now we're down in A minor.
Yes.
Commander Skywalker, do you copy?
And that
This
this
is Rogue
brass.
2. Good morning. Nice of you guys to drop by.
And so obviously this is success.
Echo base. This is Rogue.
And then we have this like
The
exultant,
big lyrical
soaring line.
Yes. Yeah,
This-
but that thing in the trumpets is associated both with the I think I found a life form, and then Han Solo saying, "Hey, good
Yeah.
morning."
it sounds like a flourish, a fanfare. Like it's flourishing. Like it feels like really
Yes.
fluid, and it's also like it's also in thirds, right? So it's not just one single line. It's like I don't know. It's very I don't know what the word to describe it is, but it's very it almost feels like it belongs to a different something different. It's very like it's lush, like against
Yes.
the backdrop of this staccato, like propulsive, like just very metronomic. I don't know. It's like a sign of life.
Yes, it very, very much is. So you have almost this mechanical, rigid strings underneath, and then this kind of freely moving trumpet on top. Yeah, exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, and that like so those are like the two main things that those are like the two main aspects, I guess, of the music up until echo bass. This is Rogue 2, I found them. Repeat, I've found them, and then when the strings come in, that's like again like a completely separate idea. And it's so it's just so well, let's just hear it. It's pretty over the top.
Do you copy? This is Rogue 2. Good morning. Nice of you guys to drop by.
A smile breaks out onto his face.
This is Rogue 2. I found them. Repeat, I found them.
I think this part is really interesting. So, yeah, the strings are in the stratosphere there. They're up
Yep.
really high.
We get this lyrical melody and this big, like, exhilarated rush up to the top of the register. Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that's really fun to play. You're like, this is my moment.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Except then there's like a lot of accidentals and stuff. And so it's kind of like, this is my moment. And if I haven't practiced, I probably don't feel very comfortable. But
That's where the faking comes into play. Unless you're being paid to perform this, in which case,
yes. Yeah. Don't fake it, everyone. Do your practicing or whatever.
Nope.
But
come prepared.
yeah. Or just skip that measure that you can't play. Let your stand partner do it.
Problem is when you both decide to do that at the same time.
I know. Oh man. Yeah. I wonder if there should be some like, okay, I'll practice the first page, you practice the second page. No. Okay, so let's see. I think that's where I think there's a fade out there. Yeah, some of the transitional. Completely different type of thing.
Oh, very, very different.
Completely different.
That weird oboe line, that super angular melody.
Yes.
Can you call it a melody? Like melodic fragment?
Yeah. Well, let's hear that again. Okay. And that piccolo is. Yeah, so how's that for a transition?
I mean, it's wild. Just the contrast from where we just came from to where we're at now is just astounding how fast that happened.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is. Yeah, I kind of want to hear that transition again because now I'm just like, how did he do that? How did they do that? Okay, I have to go a little bit further back. Huh. Okay, I think it's like I'm hearing like a sustain in like some of the notes. It's just everything else changes.
right, so we have changes in texture. The timbre changes a lot. So we go from that lush string melody to way up high in the register. We've got the tremolo and very like that glissando up.
Yeah.
That happens. That gives that kind of almost creepy feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The violins are going like, basically.
Yes.
But I think it's like, meanwhile, like the cello, it's cello and bass, or maybe both, or maybe one of, are sort of doing that like, I don't know what the notes are, but it's, that very low like tremolo effect. So we have the
Yeah.
contrast of like super low and super high and like floating away.
So so there's a lot of space in between the two registers. So which creates that very open and hollow feeling. Whereas before with the lush melody, the registral space was more filled out. You had a lot of mid-range.
Yeah. And the piccolo, of course, is adding to that, like
Yeah.
either the super high or the super low. And I guess that gives like the oboe space for its like weird little kind of melody to be more audible, where normally like
Right.
an oboe playing at that, dynamic would not necessarily cut through. Like it doesn't have to cut through. The oboe doesn't always cut through.
Right.
But if the orchestration if the arrangement leaves space in that, in that frequency range, I guess, then it can cut through like it does.
Right. And it also leaves space in the register for where the voices are going to come in. The voices
Totally.
are that mid-range, so it kind of opens up and creates the space for the sound of the characters to start their dialogue.
That's a good point. And also like another big thing in this transition, well, on screen we're seeing like I think the script calls it like strange robot surgeons, like droids, adjusting like equipment. And we hear like the back to tank and, it's like this medical facility. So the music is leaving space for the sounds of the medical facility so we can hear the equipment and everything. Like, so hear this weird breathing. You hear these like squirts, hydraulic noises, electrical stuff.
Master Luke, sir, it's so good to see you fully functional again.
Thanks, Lukey.
And then actually the music cuts out for like 3 minutes for the dialogue.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Which surprised me that through this dialogue there was actually there were a couple places in this dialogue where I was surprised there was no music.
Like any spots in particular?
Well, the kiss for one is
That's true. That's true.
yeah. Because so much of the time the music helps us know how to think about a given situation. And so when we see that, I mean, there's enough drama from the situation and from the dialogue. We have most likely pretty strong opinions and feelings about what's happening on screen. But very often the music is there to kind of help support or reinforce whatever we're experiencing
Yes.
visually.
Yes. I almost
And so
like,
the fact that it's not there.
yes. In retrospect, like, I don't know if it almost makes me think like, well, it makes sense that there's no music there because it was sort of like an impassionate kiss. Like,
Yes. Right. And so I think it makes a whole lot of sense, but kind of going through the process of asking why is there no music there helps bring you to that conclusion. Yes, it was the impassionate kiss. There's if you know the relationship between Luke and Leia later on as it is revealed, hopefully you're not feeling too strongly about where that kiss may go.
I think like the fact that there's no music makes for me the relationship between Luke and Leia has never really been something that I like, oh, how creepy, because I feel like I feel like none of the films like make it into a passionate thing at all. Like
Right.
if anything, like at first it's sort of just like not even puppy love. It's just like in A New Hope, it's just like Luke sees a pretty girl. yay. And that's kind of the extent
Right.
of it. And then here's
Yeah.
just like a little,
It's like you
showing
happen
Han
to be here, and
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
trying to stick it to Han.
Exactly. And so, yeah, because it's never made into like, they never have like a love theme or anything like that. It's sort of
Right.
whatever.
Which is good. I'm glad they
I'm glad too.
never got.
And I think the music helps make that relationship work out better for me, at
Yes.
least. For sure.
I agree. Completely agree.
Glad we're on the same page. So here's I'm just for kicks. Here's Luke's face after the kiss.
Yeah.
He's very
I love the hands behind the head, just kind of leaning back like, huh,
yeah.
well then.
It's pretty good. And let's see, another classic. I feel like Han's face here, I can see him saying like "laugh it up, fuzzball." Like, I can see it on his face. I almost feel like having no music here sort of makes the dialogue like really the thing to remember. I mean, it's like
It's great. Memorable dialogue.
it's extremely memorable dialogue, and I don't know, like something about "laugh it up, fuzzball" just becomes. It's just the more I hear it, the more funny it is to me. It's just so many ridiculous lines, just one after another. Like the nerfherder, like these scruffy looking laser brain.
Yep.
Like, yeah. Well, anyway, let's listen to a bit of it.
R to express this as relief also.
How you feeling, kid? Don't look so bad to me. In fact, he looks strong enough to pull ears off a gun dart. Thanks to
Chewie's vocalizations really help.
you owe me, Junior. Well, your worship, looks like you managed to keep me around for a little while longer.
I had nothing to do with it. General Rykin thinks it's dangerous for any ships to leave the system until we've activated the energy field.
She sounds
Good
so
story.
I think
there.
you just can't bear to let a gorgeous guy like me out of your sight.
I don't know where you get your delusions, laser brain.
Chewie.
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
But you didn't see us alone in the South Passage. She expressed her true feelings for me.
What? Are you stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
Who's scruffy looking?
I love that line so much.
R2's
It's pretty close to the mark.
I know. It's I feel like it's unexpected. Or I would have maybe thought he would say like, "Who's a nerf herder?" But he just
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Get her all riled up like that, huh, kid?
And here's the so there.
Well, I guess you don't know everything about women yet.
Chewie. Headquarters personnel report to command center.
Excuse us, please.
Gotta love that door. And then here we have entered another zone. Now we're in the Rebel Base command center. And again, there's no music in this scene. And this is when General Rykin is saying, like, we have a visitor, we've picked something up, it's metal. And then they're realizing there's something kind of weak coming through. It could be an Imperial code. So they're starting to put a few pieces together. And so they're about to realize that they are being tracked, basically. But yeah, no music. No music.
Yep.
And again, no music when we even.
One of our
I'm gonna skip forward a little bit because there's again no music when we go to the next scene, which is
Sure.
Sir, I am fluent in 6 million forms of communication. This signal is not used by the Alliance. It could be an Imperial code.
3PL.
It isn't friendly, whatever it is. Come on, Chewie, let's check it out.
So they're about to go
10 and 11 to station 38.
to the plains of Hoth, and they're about to look at the probe droid. So the probe droid spots Chewie. The probe droid also has a very musical tone.
Yes.
And it's hit from behind by a laser bolt. Explodes into a million pieces. So Han saves the day with his blaster again.
As one does.
As one does. I think Ben Burtt has also said something about the Imperial Probe Droid blowing up. Let me try to find it. I don't know. I don't remember if he's talking about it there or sort of. Okay. I know for a lot of his explosion sounds, like they they have a lot of recordings of explosions because they went to White Sands Missile Range to record missiles and rockets taking off and impacting and air-to-air interceptions. He says they went to many military bases and recorded tanks, shooting, and artillery, always in quest for what he calls the search for the ultimate explosion. And he says when the probe droid blows up, Ben Burtt remembers that one of the principal elements in that explosion was a big sheet of plywood that they snapped out in the back of the building in the parking lot. They dubbed it the wood crack attack explosion.
Okay. Can we hear the explosion again now?
And here I'm not even... Oh. Okay, this is pre-explosion. Now, to be honest, that's such a multi-layered explosion that I don't even know exactly what I'm hearing and where.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that explosion, but I think there is a moment that I could imagine being a board being cracked.
Yeah, I have
Like
an idea
a moment
of
of impact.
Yeah, I think it was for me like 60% of the way through or something. Like it was like not. It was after the first things. Then there, because there were like a few different hits.
Yeah.
But the wood crack attack has a nice ring to it. Let's see. Before we, well, the next time we hear music is going to be the Imperial March. So before we get to that section, I want to ask you about like your own like areas of research and how you normally, like as a music theorist, you don't just do like, I don't know, and like talking about when things go up a perfect fifth and when things go to A minor or whatever. Like,
right.
You do very, you do stuff that's like kind of in a, okay, when people say that like music is related to math or like, or whatever, like, sure. But like you really, really do math.
Yes. Yes. I somehow wound up doing like applying mathematical principles to music. I use math to analyze harmony and both like individual harmonies and what we call macroharmony, which is kind of the harmonic landscape over kind of a moderate span of time. And I do that both with analyzing scores, but also analyzing audio as well. I've got a paper coming up that uses like Spotify data to analyze audio the same way that I might analyze a score.
Okay. So, and your the distinction is that for when you say score, some people think of score and soundtrack as being like, but you mean score as in the paper music,
notated.
Like the notation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And what's kind of fascinating about that is the way performers, because there's a lot of liberty that performers can take from the notated music. The notated music is only just a small part of the picture, but then you have so much variation in personality that individual performers can take on. So one of the ideas that I'm working on now, if I were to put it trivially, it's that different performances sound different, which is obvious, but I'm kind of using both music theory and some math and computational aspects to figure out exactly how and why they sound different and comparing that to the score.
I'm curious when you say, first of all, when you say like macroharmony, you're talking about, so normally when I guess we talk about harmony, we're thinking maybe like in over the course of a phrase or maybe a movement or even just a single, like, I don't know, vertical, like, I don't know what it's called, like a single bar or single note, you know,
Right.
cross section of notes. But you mean over the course of an entire film, like?
More over the course of about a phrase or so.
Okay.
So instead of thinking of harmony, earlier we were talking about like a B flat minor chord. So that would be an example of one harmony. Whereas for macroharmony, I'm looking over the course of the phrase, what are all the chords that were used? What are all the pitches that were used to create those chords? And then the fun comes in if there were any, we sometimes refer to them as non-chord tones or like chromatic notes that are adding extra flavor to the sound and how those affect the overall harmonic experience. So if I'm listening to, say, like some early classical piece, let's go say Mozart, it's going to have one type of flavor of sound. Whereas John Williams, he moves around harmonically a whole lot more than Mozart does. It's going to give a very different macroharmonic profile or sense of macroharmony. And so I can kind of describe the different flavors, like kind of dissect the recipe of all the different harmonic elements that went into making Mozart sound like Mozart and not John Williams.
Interesting. So how is this different from, say, like your standard off-the-shelf, like atonal music theory practices? Sort of like with, like, you know, I'm no expert, but I do know, like, when I am approaching, like, atonal music and thinking of, like, atonal music theory, like pitch class set theory, I'm thinking of, like, oh, you may not notice that there's actually some patterns here. So, you know, it feels sort of like, I don't want to say like, it sounds kind of related to what you're talking about almost.
Right. Yeah, definitely kind of related. So my particular methodologies that I use kind of divide harmony into 6 different flavors.
Okay.
And each flavor has a different type of sound. So for example, we have what's called chromaticity or clustering on the chromatic cycle. So a cluster like that. So that's one flavor versus something that's more diatonic sounding would be clustered around, we would say the circle of fifths. And that is going to sound very much like a major scale or a pentatonic collection.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I've got a couple other flavors, like octatonicity is going to sound very diminished and whatnot. And so by calculating how much each one of these flavors is present, that's more what I'm going into rather than little motivic cells.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, I have so many questions already. Okay. These cells... Okay, so obviously there are many cross sections in which we can analyze music, of course, and harmony is but one of them. When you say that that there's like variation in performers, like even in playing the same score, like obviously, like I know that, like you listen to a few different recordings of, you know, violinists or whatever, all playing, you know, Tchaikovsky concerto. It's all, or just like to strip it down, like Bach, unaccompanied Bach. You'll get so many different variations. However, I am not sure how that relates to harmony because I'm not unless we're talking about because if they're still reading the same music and not making up their own cadenza or something where they're like writing new music, why would the harmony change? Because wouldn't they just be reading or like, you know, playing what the composer has written?
Yes. So they may all be playing the same notes, but what I'm interested in is how the harmony is expressed. So if I play just a C major triad, but I really emphasize the E somehow, if I add a couple extra E's, can I change the experience of the harmony? And when performers emphasize one note or another, or hold on to a note and sustain it slightly longer, they're bringing emphasis to that note of the harmony. So I'm interested in how kind of the realized or like the embodied harmony is different from the score.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Now I understand the utility in analyzing recordings for sure. Okay. Okay. So how would you define harmony? Like,
Oh gosh,
I think
that's a
I think
mess.
people have like intuitive understandings of it. Like I would think of it as like harmony is like the combination of it's like the combination of all the notes happening at the same time, kind of.
Sure.
It's like the little package. I don't know.
Right, right. So I have found myself using the word sonority more and more and more instead of harmony to kind of encapsulate all of the sounds happening in one instance. For harmony, harmony to me is much more calculated and planned and abstract. So I would, if that makes sense. So I can play a whole bunch of notes and say, this was such and such harmony. This was a C major chord. But the actual lived reality of it might be something a little messier and would be what I would term more of a sonority. So for me, the harmony is the more abstract idea.
Sort of like the discrete math, like the sort of like the math, I don't know, the perfect equation that you write, but then like when you actually test the experiment out in real life, it's kind of that, but like there's a little bit of variation.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I get it. Sonority. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've just been using the word sonority more recently in my own dialogue. But we'll see where that goes.
That's fascinating. Okay, so, oh my gosh, what tools do you use to analyze audio? Like, yeah, what tools do you use to analyze audio?
Yeah, I write computer scripts in Python, and and basically run the audio through the script. And what that does is it divides the music into tiny, tiny little time segments and gives me pitch information and stuff about volume, stuff about timbre, all kinds of information just for each little tiny little clip. And then I start looking at a bunch of those clips and then larger collections of those clips and larger to see what's happening at kind of each level. So I can get really granular and focused or really zoom out.
Have you put any Star Wars things?
I haven't, but
I'm so curious what you'd
now I
find.
wish I had. Yeah. Can I send you stuff after?
Absolutely.
Works?
I'll definitely post anything that you send me for sure.
Great.
I know, okay, we talked about like spectrograms right before we started recording, and I'm curious how you use those.
Sure. I don't actually use spectograms in my research very much at this point. I find them fascinating to look at, and I can get some information from them, but that's an area that I'm wanting to explore and to learn more about and to incorporate into my research and teaching a whole lot more than I have now.
So I will what's funny is like I do use spectrograms, and I'll show a spectrogram on screen so that listeners who are watching this episode can see sort of what some of the clips we're listening to look like on a spectrogram. But I know from like reading, from researching you and your work that the things that you use, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I kind of know what it is, but the discrete like Fourier
transform.
Fourier transform. Like I know DFT, right? Like I know that can be used to, like, that goes into the tool that is the spectrogram.
Yes, that's used in audio analysis a lot. Yeah.
Yes. What is that?
So the discrete Fourier transform is just one of several different types of transforms. And basically what it does
What's a transform?
is it takes mathematical operation.
Okay.
That's called, the transporter is just a black box that does magic and
Gotcha. Yeah.
spits out information on the other side. So you input your audio signal into the black box. Magic happens. And then out the other side, it gives you data about how strong different frequencies are.
Okay.
So that's part of what's happening in the spectrogram. It takes kind of the raw audio signal and then splits it out, and you can start seeing the strength and relative weakness of different frequencies. So in a spectrogram, you'll often see lots of horizontal lines going up. Yeah, there we go. So the brighter the line, the stronger that particular frequency. And then the more lines you have stacked up, kind of the brighter the sound, and the fewer lines, the less intense, we tend to think of that as a much darker type of sound.
Yes. Okay. So for those for those watching, I have a real-time spectrogram going for just talking right now, and if I just give it 2 seconds of silence, you'll see it all black. So now I'm talking again, and you can see it almost looks like a comb, like with all the little like lines that you can see. I don't know, horizontal lines. And if I were to like la, that totally
So we
looks a
see-
certain way.
Yep. And actually, if you do that and change your vowel, like go through the different vowel sounds, you can see the difference in timbre or tone quality in the spectrogram.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're doing when we're talking and changing our mouth shape is really just changing which frequencies are coming out, and that's what gives us our different vowel sounds and whatnot, is by changing which frequencies are more present.
I find that so interesting because like I think a lot of people, or at least a lot of people in audio production, or I don't know, music tech nerds, use spectrograms, but just most of us don't. It's kind of I just accept the black box that makes that happen. You know, like
Right.
This is a cool tool, and it's useful in audio editing because you can see, like, if you have noise, you can like, that's kind of just a tip. Like, if you have noise somewhere, you can look at the spectrogram and see the concentration of where that noise is, that you know, like what frequent, you know, so you can have a better idea how to equalize, how to apply EQ to what you're listening to, or, you know, erase certain parts at certain frequencies. But for film composers and sound designers, I think intuitively, like, John Williams has definitely talked about how, it's so distracting to see it like while I'm talking. I'm like, I can't stop looking at it. John Williams has definitely talked about how, you know, he'll try to come up with things that are not competing with the sound design that is happening in a similar frequency range. So now I'm very curious. Actually, I'll put that back up on screen and I'll play that section where we have that. I'm going to play a couple of those sections that we were just listening to so we can see.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Let's go back to...
This is Rogue 2. This is Rogue 2. Captain Solo,
Oh, it's not
do
picking...
you copy?
Oh, it's not picking that up. Damn. Well, okay. Oh, I can still do it, actually. Okay. Oh, this is cool. I can... All right, everyone, you're seeing, I'm screen sharing my computer, for better or for worse. So I'm just gonna, nice, okay. There we go. Turn the volume down a little bit. So you can see, that's all like kind of
Master
almost
Luke,
white
sir,
noisy.
It's so good to see you fully Good to see you fully functional again.
Thanks, Tweaky.
Our to express this is relief also.
How you feeling, kid?
Nope, it's a little bit before, my bad.
Yeah. Can you go to about... Yeah.
Nope.
Echo base. I've got something. Not much, but it could be a life form.
I'm gonna stop that right now. I'm gonna change the scale or something. So that can maybe be.
Yeah, so I love that moment as an example, actually. It was right around 27-ish seconds in is when the orchestra comes in. And you can see in the spectrogram the change from kind of the white noise and the sounds of the speeders to when that very rhythmic string, you can actually see the rhythm.
Okay, yeah, let's listen for that. Okay, I'm going to pause. What you're seeing right now, and actually, I feel like there's a better scale that I could use. What's a better scale? 0 to 3? Let's see. That may have made it worse. But what you're talking about is you can see these kind of defined, like little pillars, right?
Yes.
And that is the do 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 do. Whereas if we go before, you just see like it just looks noisy. Maybe I should make this logarithmic. No, I should not make it logarithmic. I should make it linear. Okay.
Echo base. I've got something. Not much, but it could be a lot.
Here's the white noisy. There, that's a little better. Oh, that's interesting. You can see sort of the harmonizer. But it looks like splatter paint. And then here's where the pillars come in. Yeah, because the x-axis is time, obviously.
Echo base. I've got something.
You can see those spikes.
Could be a life form. Commander Skywalker, do you copy? This
Little
is
dialogue.
Rogue 2. This is Rogue 2. Captain Solo, do you copy? Commander Skywalker, do you copy? This is Rogue 2. Good morning. Nice of you guys to drop by. Echo base, this is Rogue 2. I found them. Repeat, I found them.
You see a lot of that comb action when the strings come in, especially.
And you can also see all the speeder sounds, like the you'll see like a descending line kind of suddenly interject and overlay over those pillars of the rhythm of the strings.
Right, because this is frequency, so the lower it goes, the lower in pitch. Yeah, this is quite interesting. Like, this is just a free tool, so shout out to academo.org, who made this free online spectrogram. And like, obviously, the resolution isn't, the best, but if you have like Adobe Audition or something, or if you just, play with some other tools, other programs have it as well, you can really see even more detail, and you can see just some incredible clarity, and I feel like some very some surprises. You can see some surprises that connect some dots, perhaps, about things that you've heard about music and sound that you haven't necessarily internalized or understood, like harmonics and stuff like that. Like, even if I just put that back up and I just talk, you can just see, like, inherently just in talking, you can just you can see how, like, all those little comb things. By comb things, I mean, like, like, hi. You can see I'm just really on one note, but you can see all of those, like, harmonics. You can see all those, like, overtones. It's quite fascinating.
Plus, it's just fun to play with, just to talk into a spectrogram for a while.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing.
Grab things from around the house and see what kind of sounds they make.
Totally. So you do the math that gets us there. So that's very cool. And let's see. Wow. I'm going to put links in the show notes for the super nerds that are listening, but I also know that you have some, like, online tools
Yes.
On your
Yeah, I
website.
do have a website, and I have a few tools there. One that is there allows you to input a musical score. The way it's set up now, it's pulling from a set repository. I don't have it set up yet where you can upload one of your own. Kind of working on that.
Cool.
But
Okay.
that's a feature I'm hoping to have soon. But it will make essentially a panorama that shows these different, the panorama generator. It'll make a panorama that shows all the different flavors of sound that I was talking about, those 6 different flavors.
Oh.
And so this is what generates that. And then the visualizer that you were on before is a tool for looking at kind of individual harmonies and individual sonorities to see kind of exact measurements.
Oh, okay. Well, this looks familiar. This is like the clock, the clock
Yeah.
face.
Oh,
for-
yes. Oh, good clock faces.
for the pitch class stuff, which we'll be getting, listeners will be doing more. Don't worry, we'll be getting way more into pitch class stuff in some future episodes pretty shortly. So, more to come on that. But thank you for that little introduction to your work. I mean, I know that like we're barely scratching the surface because you have so many. There are so many like conceptual things that you're thinking of that kind of underpin your work too. And so I was like really drawn to, I was really drawn to some of the things that we were talking about before via email and some of your, philosophies as a music theorist and whatnot. So you know what, before we, this might be a good point for me to run the weekly clip of the little quick topic for this episode, and then we will continue talking about like music theory, applying it to here. I have a couple listener questions, and then we'll continue with the rest we'll get to the start of the Imperial March. So, if that sounds good, then I'm going to initiate that right when my mouse does it. So here we go. Oh, listeners, today's little video example, or today's little quick tip is about something. It's a little bit of a listening challenge. You'll see. It's a listening challenge. I'm going to play an excerpt from The Empire Strikes Back. Let's rewind that so we can start at the beginning. Today's quick tip is a listening challenge. I'm going to play an excerpt from The Empire Strikes Back soundtrack, and I want you to focus on one individual instrumental part and try to follow that same part from start to finish. This is Yoda's theme as we hear it in the end credits. How was that? Did you focus on the flute and piccolo with the melody? Or maybe the oboe and clarinet? Well, either way, let's try this again, and this time listen for a different instrument. There are lots to pick from. We have flutes, clarinet, piccolo, oboe, violin, viola, cello, bass, and some other ones that I'm putting on screen. Take your pick. How did that go? Did you hear those little triangle dings? And the string pizzicato? And the harp? On Star Wars Music Minute, a lot of our analysis involves zooming in on individual parts of the score before zooming out and talking about the whole thing in context. When I say parts, by the way, I don't mean it as in the part from 110 to 120. I mean parts as in the individual instrumental parts that make up an orchestra. So we have the tuba part, the first violin part, the piano part. That's how parts are defined in orchestra lingo. The ability to hear and focus on individual parts in a score comes more naturally to some people than others, but you probably have a degree of this skill already. Maybe you're good at isolating the bass part in a 4-piece rock band, but are less comfortable isolating the oboe part in an orchestra, or vice versa. The good news is that this skill can absolutely be developed. While deconstruction isn't necessarily the end game of musical enjoyment, Being able to separate what you're listening to into its component parts is a skill that can open up a lot of possibilities, both creatively and analytically. It's sort of like taking apart a watch to see how the pieces fit together. 12 Tone made a YouTube video about this, and in that video, they called the ability to focus on individual parts within a piece orchestral listening. I think they just came up with that term, and I rather like it, so I'm going to use it. Anyway, let's practice orchestral listening one last time, and this time, try to zero in on a part that you haven't paid attention to yet. Maybe you'll catch that triangle, or the part where the violins switch from plucking to bowing. How did that go? If you still suck at it, that's okay. We all have room to improve. And the more familiar you become with the instruments in the orchestra, the easier it'll be to recognize them. We will have many more opportunities to practice orchestral listening over the course of this season. Oh, that's the wrong overlay. Here we go. Oh no! Now people know who a future guest is if they're watching. Weird how that happened. I don't have control over my computer sometimes. Yeah. So that's today's little topic: orchestral listening. It's something that is just. It's not even like a thing. It's just sort of like a thing that a lot of people a lot of us in our conversation just have taken for granted as like a basis for discussion. Just even knowing that like, oh yeah, there's like flutes doing this and then there's like basses doing that. So I just feel like it's a good like underlying skill to have to
absolutely
to talk about music.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a little question for you that is like kind of, why does harmony matter? Or why does knowing harmony, why does knowing the harmonic landscape of something matter?
That is an excellent question. I'll start off with, first of all, it's cool. I think it's cool, but I am nerd.
I love that answer.
I like understanding why something sounds the way it does. And kind of like what you were talking about before, kind of dissecting all the little pieces that make up the sound. That's part of what I'm doing. What are the different flavors of harmony that make up John Williams' sound and his vocabulary? So that's, first of all, just on its face, fascinating to me. And then beyond that, this helps us with issues like defining genre. How do you know where one genre begins and when another one ends? Some of it has to do with harmonic language. That's certainly not the only thing, but it is a small piece of it. Why does one composer's work sound like them and not someone else? These sorts of large-scale differentiation is useful. Looking at trends over time and what has happened over long periods of time. And in some respects, being able to track those changes and see what's happened, kind of what preferences used to be and what preferences are now.
Yeah.
That is a good, interesting study as well.
I feel like, I'd be so interested to see how different like film soundtracks, yeah, the trends, like I feel like the trends in film alone would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Would be fascinating.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in seeing how your work develops, especially knowing that it's like also about like individual performances. Like that's very compelling to me, because I think it's so easy to just analyze what's on the page, you know?
Right.
And
that's actually why I started going down that performance route, because I felt like I was getting stuck just looking at what's on the page, because that's not how I experience music.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, I know, since I know that you're a violinist, like this it all kind of makes sense to me because when I talk to music theorists who, okay, most music, there's not like a clear separation. Okay, I'm not saying theorists aren't aren't performers. That's not true at all. In fact, most of them are. Most of them are or do play instruments as well. But I feel like violin is like one where I don't want to say it like especially matters, but I feel like even from I feel like okay, you grew up playing piano too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I feel like so I grew up playing piano and violin as well. So with piano, I feel like things like tone and emphasizing different, notes in a chord, and certainly those expressive elements were definitely important. But I feel like they came a little bit later in my piano studies and performance practice, whereas in violin, I feel like that was like, it's something that you can't avoid from like day one, is like thinking about your tone and even just like the variations in where you're going to decide your pitch is going to be, and just making so many choices that like as a pianist, I never had to make choices about tuning.
Right. Because you hit the button.
You hit the button.
You press the key and the note comes out.
Yes, exactly. And on violin, it's like there's like whole philosophies of like we also had the same teacher growing up, right? So like there's no such thing as like in tune or not in tune. It's sort of like if you're playing a chord, but like it's also part of a melody, which comes in like a lot of unaccompanied Bach is a thing. I'm not going to whip out Bach right now, but like if I'm playing like I don't even know if my instrument's in tune. Like, okay, simple chord, but like if I'm playing it in the context of like some sort of a scale, I might shift, where my thirds are or my fifths. Like, I might shift a couple things, and that was just part of it, like from middle school, like, flatten that a little bit, like melodic tuning or whatever, like.
That reminds me of like one of my very first lessons of my master's degree. I walk in there and I play my Bach, do the thing, get to the end, and my teacher, my professor goes, your intonation, you sound like a piano. And I go, oh, thank you. He goes, no. It's like, oh, okay, we have some work to do.
Oh my gosh. That's really funny. That's really funny. For listeners who are like kind of confused, okay, redux explanation, the very shortest way to get from point A to point B. Okay, so the 12-tone scale is not inevitable. There are certain empirically measurable properties of sound, and that sort of partially shaped the reason we have all the notes that we recognize in like the Western scale, etc. But a lot of notes are sort of built on interval ratios, and sort of like which things sound most sonorous, and which is sort of like which intervals have the simplest ratios, right? Correct me if I'm wrong at any point. Which intervals have the simplest ratios, and so like ratios, like just certain intervals have more complicated ones. So there's more like beating in the sound waves, interference, I guess. And, for whatever reason, like the ratios don't actually like line up perfectly. You can't like just tune yourself by having perfect ratios, which is why like even if you tune your violin to the most perfect fifths, that you can feel the vibration when it's right. Like,
oh, that's a good feeling.
You can tune your string, your open strings so perfectly, and then when you check the lowest string against the highest string, there will be a little bit of a pitch drift where, unfortunately, then the lowest string and the highest string are no longer in tune. If you tuned it's very annoying. It's extremely annoying, and so for that reason, there are lots of philosophies on the different ways to adjust for these tuning, these little unfortunate sort of leap year type things that don't work out.
Right.
And so one of the ways that pianos are unfortunately bound to is that they take sort of the way that it works out wrong, it's sort of distributed evenly across all of the notes. So you don't hear as harsh of like jumps, like, oh, when things get, when you've tuned everything perfectly and there's something that doesn't fit quite right, that sounds really bad. But on piano, you don't really ever hear that. Rather, you hear everything is sort of just like very, very slightly out of tune, but it's distributed evenly. So it kind of mostly is off the radar. Mm-hmm. It's called 12-tone equal temperament. And violinists hate it.
Yes. Yeah. We're capable of a lot more nuance.
Yes.
And we can use that for just both, say in a string quartet, we can tune the string quartet together differently than a piano would, but also we can use it really expressively. So if I'm reaching kind of a climactic moment and I really want to emphasize, say, the leading tone, and I would raise it and get it as tight to the tonic as possible.
Yes. Like a leading tone would be like if I were going like if I stay in G minor, if I'm like you could, that leading tone is like that second to last. You could really milk it, like, and soloists will really milk it, and like, like I think of like in Zigeunerweisen where it's like, and they'll like switch fingers. Oh yeah, you could really milk. You could really milk that. But if you were to then match that pitch, like say, oh, I'm playing an F sharp, match it to the piano. Let's see if you match the piano. The piano is flatter. Like you're not matching, and that's because the piano is never going to do that expressive. Is never going to, bump up the pitch for expressive purposes because it's stuck just down here. Equal temperament. Yeah.
So, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's very cool that you're sort of bringing that aspect to music theory, basically, to like analytical, whatever you're doing, like, because oftentimes I talk to music theorists and I think all of this stuff is very interesting. And then I also think how off the radar that type of thing is in my actual performance practice, or even compositionally, which stems from my performance practice. Like when I'm composing for the violin, I'm feeling the violinistic gestures that are just natural on the violin. I'm not thinking, I'm going to use this harmonic. I'm going to do this, harmony thing. I'm going to do this thing. Right. So anyway, yay. You're bridging this gap.
Lovely.
That's very cool. Love it. Okay, so, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit now. I'm just putting you on the spot quite a bit because I think your work is very interesting. I want, what is some of your like? Okay, you have a very specific expertise, but you also have a very, how do you talk to people? How do you talk to students? Because I know you teach about music when they have sort of a different lens or not even the same vocabulary or scaffolding that you do. Like, how do you make sense of how do you have space for, like, what can you find? What am I trying to say? Like, what? We're talking so abstract, and I'm like, what am I talking about? Like,
I'm not quite sure where this one's going.
Yep, it's okay. Yep. It's okay. It'll come to me. It'll come to me.
We'll get there.
You know what? I'm just gonna read from your email. Okay.
Sure.
Which also mirrors what's on your website. Okay. As a music theorist, I'd love. Let's see. Analysis is my way of expressing to other people how I hear and understand a musical work, and an invitation to someone else to share in my experience. When I read or listen to someone else's analysis, I am responding to their invitation to hear the work as they do. This creates the opportunity for dialogue about how we experience the same stimulus, the music, in different ways based on what we attend to. So what are the different types of things that people can attend to?
Sure. Actually, this goes right along with one of the classes I'm teaching right now. I'm teaching Theory 5, which is, we're covering like 20th and 21st century music mostly. And they are doing quite a few analyses over the course of the semester, where I asked them to address 3 major branches of music. I asked them to address form, meaning kind of the structure, how the piece is put together. What are the different parts? How do they relate together? Do they not relate together? How do you know when one section has finished and another has begun?
Oof.
All of that is kind of under the umbrella of form.
Okay.
Then I asked them to talk some about pitch. That could be talk about the melody, talk about the harmonies that are used. We've been studying different types of approaches to pitch organization that different composers have used. And then finally, I have kind of a catch-all category of other things where they can talk about timbre, they could talk about the texture, they could talk about rhythm and meter. And so all these different aspects of music are what I'm asking them to tell me about their experiences in a particular piece during their analysis. Tell me about all these different aspects and your experience of them.
Oh, okay. So in the context of something like what we've been talking about today, from Empire Strikes Back, would the form be sort of, like, could I say that the form is governed by the scene transitions, and so sort of those sections that we've been talking about?
Right. Yeah, so I would view that as kind of a large scale form, and then from there we can zoom in even closer. For example, during the speeders with the da 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 da, and we talked about how the music kind of changes when you get another line of dialogue, and so the dialogue is causing changes in the structure and causing us to move forward in the music and something else to happen.
Ah, yes. Okay, let's listen back.
Echo Bay.
So this is
I've got something.
like a new section.
Not much, but it could
New
be
section.
right for.
Yeah.
Commander Skywalker, do you copy? This is Rogue 2.
And then here, new
This is
section.
And then here on kind of a new section here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Captain Solo,
And here, kind of a
do
new
you
section.
copy?
Right.
New section.
Commander Skywalker, do you copy? This is Rogue 2. Good morning. Nice of you guys to drop by. Echo
New
Base,
section.
And then very new.
this is Rogue 2.
Very new
I
section.
found them.
Oh,
Repeat.
okay. So you
Yeah,
can go like
so-
more, smaller, into smaller sections.
Yeah. Yeah. So from the very, very large scale all the way down.
Cool. Okay. One thing that I think is interesting about those little sections is that, well, it's is that the change is it stays within. It's not the exact same relationship between all of the notes, but the basic thing just gets all shifted. It's not just
Yes.
a smooth, modulation that you don't even realize is happening, and then you end up in a different key through these tiny little changes that are almost imperceptible or whatever. It's very defined. It's defined
Yep,
levels.
He picks up the pitches and plops them over here. Then
Yeah.
we take the whole thing and we move it over here.
Exactly. It's almost Baroque in that way.
Yes.
Yeah. And then pitches would be the notes, basically, whether
Yes.
melody or harmony. And then the timbre is sort of what we were talking about with the sounds of the instruments and the space being left. And the rhythm, we didn't even talk about that too much, but it is,
Yeah.
I guess.
But here I would talk a lot about the perpetual motion of the rhythm, the motor going.
The motor. Mhm.
is one of the big salient aspects of rhythm here.
Yeah, I guess when you are sort of forced to consider multiple parameters, it is easier to put language to what you're hearing, to hear the differences, to notice the differences between, two pieces of music, for example, which you might be like, they're both in G major and they're both slow. Like if you stop there, then you might not notice all the other things that they have that are unique about them.
Right.
Anyway, okay, I want to be your student. Okay, so shall we continue listening?
Sure.
Okay, so we're about to get to a very exciting part. So, just playing it cool. It's fine. It's not that exciting, right? It's extremely exciting because it's the first time in this movie, except for this very brief part at the very beginning of the film, but we won't talk about that yet, where we hear, we'll lead up to it a bit. Okay. Now we're on the, that was the probe droid exploding.
I didn't hit it that hard. Must have had a self-destruct.
An Imperial Probe Droid.
It's a good bet the Empire knows we're here.
We better start the evacuation.
And that's the end of the 5 minutes. Oh, just leaving us hanging. But that's so, yet again, that's so different from everything that came before.
And visually right there, we get the big contrast too, where suddenly we're out in space and whatnot. And so that huge, almost abrupt cut makes sense. It's supported by both the visual and the audio.
Right, which is really important when talking about film music, for sure.
Yes.
Which is surprisingly easy to neglect to pay attention to. Especially when the music is when there's so much to talk about just musically speaking alone. Like, I think it's easy to talk about Star Wars music in a vacuum because there's so much there. You can just talk about them as pieces. But then it brings it to a whole new level when you talk about how the visuals support the music and vice versa.
Right.
So yeah, the Empire. We're in Imperial. We're heading to Imperial area. Okay, we're seeing the Imperial fleet in space, and we hear the Imperial March vamp, and then we hear the beginning of the Imperial March theme, and it still has a very steady rhythm, just like the, but for me at least, it doesn't feel like it has the same motor. It doesn't feel like it has the same, quite the same motor. It definitely, it's driving in a way, but it feels more, I don't know if I want to say like on the beat. It feels more centered.
Right.
I don't know why.
I agree. And I think that has to do with, in the motor, I feel like if I were playing this, I would be kind of up on the edge of my seat, kind of leaning forward into it. And it's almost like ever so slightly, like, it's not ahead, it's not rushing, but it's like on that cusp where it wants to push ahead.
You know what? Something that is neglected sometimes in conversations is like, there's accents, and accents can definitely make a huge difference. It's like, I'm for those watching, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat, kind of emulating how I would be doing this in orchestra, sort of like. Yeah, you're just like really locked in and just like literally leaning forward a little bit to.
And for me, my eyes open up real wide, and I kind of forget to blink.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. The accents. Yeah, the accent placement can definitely impact that.
Right. Whereas the Imperial March is much more, I don't want to say laid back, but kind of settled and secure in the beat.
yeah, I don't know, smug. I don't know if like it's confident.
It's very confident.
It's polished is maybe not even the right word. It's more like very prepared, militaristic. You know, it's military. It's militaristic. It's
Right. But in that way, the Imperial March almost sounds more, it's militaristic, but sounds more human, whereas the motor rhythm sounds almost mechanical.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I hear that. I'm trying to think of how the Imperial March sounds more human, though. Let's play it. Is it because of the melody?
I think that what I mean by sounds more human is I can imagine situations where I would actually interact with this as a human, as a march, engaging with it as a human. Whereas the ba 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 ba, I'm not quite sure in my like lived experience how I would physically interact with that music. But I could imagine marching.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean. Okay, human as in, human, not as in warm or anything like that.
Right. No, definitely not warm and inviting.
Yeah, definitely not. Okay, yeah,
But human as I would have some lived experience that embodies or is related to that music.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying there. I kind of get it. Yeah. It's funny because like, if you're listening and you don't get it, that's totally fine because this is all completely in the realm of like subjective leaps and sort of, I don't know, I feel like talking about music and there's a lot of like leap of not faith, but like there are certain leaps that are just sort of necessary while you're trying on hypotheses and just,
Right.
yeah. There's a lot
And
of just
I can
feeling.
imagine someone else actually reversing my associations and calling the motor rhythm more human and this more mechanical. The Empire I also associate with mass production and lots of uniformity, which could be facets of a mechanical aspect, whereas the first one has an anxiety to it, that edge of the seat, the are they going to find them, will they be rescued, and so in that case has the more human emotion. So me ascribing humanness or machineness to one or the other really kind of depends on which aspects I'm focusing on and which associations I'm drawing in.
Totally. Yeah, all of that. Yes. Yeah. What it's like so much of music and sound discussions isn't about the stimulus itself, but the response or like our perception of that stimulus.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of unpacking like my own previous experiences and biases that I have and my baggage. So when I hear a march, what baggage am I bringing along that helps me interpret that or understand that in some particular way? And it might be different than someone else, what their experiences with marches have been.
Something else that comes to mind is the sound mixing. Like in this part with the march, which I'll play again. That's not the march, but okay, we'll play this example first because I was going to play them both anyway. Here is the Snowspeeder, sorry. Okay, because I'm hearing...
Echo base. I've got something. Not much, but it could be a life form.
Yeah, I can't detach it from the speeders, from the image of the speeders. And also it doesn't help that like the sound is like, I can hear the speeders. So like I know that they're flying and I know, because of just what's happening on screen, like the separation between the like non-diegetic music and the diegetic sound is pretty extreme. Like it's obviously this is score and so it feels a little bit separate. Whereas in the Imperial March example, I'm almost thinking of
An Imperial Probe Droid.
It's a good bet the Empire knows we're here.
We better start the evacuation.
I can imagine this taking place in a big room at a ceremony at the welcoming of the Emperor Vader. I guess I'm coming to the same conclusion as you, as it just feels more real. It feels more, and it's also just also because of my association with like a big shot of like all the stormtroopers and like Vader. It feels like this is there. This music is there. This scene. Whereas the Snowspeeder music feels like action music for flying. Like
Right. And what you were saying about the sound mixing and not being able to separate the music from the speeders, it sounds like in the Snowspeeder section, the point is the speeders and the music is there to more support them. Whereas here with the Imperial March, the point is the music. And yes, you hear some sounds of the ship, but they're much softer than in the speeders section.
Totally. Yeah. The priority of the final mix. It's hard to imagine them being swapped, but I'm sure that could be done. I keep forgetting what this like what this thing is called, where they didn't do it with. I don't know if they did it with music, but like where you show people like the same scene but change like one little thing. It completely alters like your perception of the scene, and I feel like I always wonder how that would happen with music, and I kind of wish there were some more like experiments where people were seeing scenes for the first time and score like with different elements of the score tweaked, either like different music or just like different priority in the mix, just like different mixing or something.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what audience reactions are to that.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, or just like, yeah, how it would need to be a very big sample size probably to get any meaningful results because it's so fuzzy of a area.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm always curious how that stuff alters our perception. I'm going to put on screen the Imperial March vamp. By the way, this is from Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars. And it's this section, this before the actual like theme comes in. It's
Better start the evacuation.
this. And as you can see, if you can read music, the transcription is on the screen. But I'll also read the descriptions, the description that he wrote of this incidental motif, which is triplet-filled rhythm combined with a minor 1 to flat 6 oscillation, wholly characteristic of Imperial March. Version of this figure used at end of concert arrangement, heard virtually unchanged for Kylo Ren's introduction in The Force Awakens. And sort of this chord progression is so embedded in the fabric of Star Wars villainy at this point. It is like, this is the start of it, but sorry, I made my piano louder, but so minor 1, so just a minor chord, a flat minor 6. So a normal minor 6 would be, so sort of a more quote unquote normal way to do this would be, oh wait, no, sorry. Wait, what am I talking about? What am I talking about? I don't know. No, that is what it is. Oh, it's hard for me to like not do it as the Imperial March that we know. No. What am I trying to do? You're like, you're confused too. Nope. There are so many other minor chords that he could have gone to. Why am I blanking on this? Anyway, he could have gone, I don't know. These all sound so basic now, but this is such a gnarly, what is that?
Right.
Chromatic median.
Yes. Right. Well, and part of what makes it gnarly is there's no key that contains both of those chords, both a G minor and an E flat minor.
Yeah.
And so it's already disrupted kind of traditional sense of key or being in a key.
Yes. Yeah. It throws you off kilter, and
Yeah.
it's almost a little bit, it's almost impressive that seems normal now. That this chord progression seems so normal to me, because it's been emulated in Star Wars media since Empire Strikes Back. At this moment, the show Andor is coming out, and so we've been talking on our live streams about the music of Andor, and I've noticed that the Imperial sort of themes in that also revolve around same chords, different melody.
Right.
It's not like nothing from John Williams is used, but like the chords are there,
Sure. And it's so distinctive and has such strong, it imprints on our collective memory so strongly that you can use just those chords and make a whole host of references. And that's fantastic.
Yes. And let's see. The other thing that I was going to put on screen was, what's this? No, this Imperial March. Okay, yeah. So this is the actual transcription of the theme. And I think something that I find really interesting about this is just like the melody itself kind of outlines a major chord. Which feels it feels almost ironic in a way. And then not that. I find this theme really difficult to talk about because it's so ubiquitous, because it's so popular. And so it's hard. It's too embedded in me. Like it takes effort to step back and like make myself analyze it, if that makes sense.
Right. It's almost like I know it too well.
Yes. But the singing test is very difficult on this theme, I will say. And the singing test, just if you can sing a theme from start to finish and end on the right pitch. This one is very hard because it's so chromatic.
Yes.
Yeah. This is not a scientific test, by the way. It's just, personal test. But yeah, that takes us to the end of these minutes. And the Imperial March begins the cue 2M4, the probe scanner, for those curious. Is there anything else about these minutes, the music, the sound of these minutes, or just the Empire Strikes Back in general, that you want to, that you haven't gotten to talk about?
I think that about covers it. I had a lot of fun exploring these minutes and getting to know them way better. Like I said at the beginning, before I started listening to these minutes in particular, I didn't realize just how much music was actually happening because I was always so focused on the action and the excitement of what was going on. My ears just weren't listening for the music. I was watching the movie.
Yeah. Did you, because I know we were both Star Wars fans from a very young age. To what extent were you a soundtrack enthusiast, if at all?
Oh, I loved the soundtrack to A New Hope. That's the one that we had the CD, we listened to over and over and over and over. I don't think I listened to The Empire Strikes Back as much. I want to say that growing up, A New Hope is definitely the soundtrack I'm far more familiar with.
Okay. And in general, did you listen to a lot of soundtracks from other films? Were you into them at all?
Not as much. No, I never really listened to a whole lot of soundtracks. I think my sister probably listened to a lot more soundtracks than I did, and because she was doing it, I can't do the same thing that my sister's doing. I need to listen to something else. So I certainly grew up hearing lots of soundtracks, but sibling rivalry had to
That's funny.
meant that I had my own things that I listened to.
That's funny. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Or not with the sibling rivalry part, but yeah, I didn't really listen to soundtracks growing up. And my enjoyment of Star Wars, I didn't even have like I didn't have the A New Hope soundtrack. I think the only like soundtrack I had was Phantom Menace. So, yeah, the A New Hope just didn't. Yeah, we didn't listen to like music in the house really. So, and I just wasn't. I didn't. Yeah, I just didn't. I don't know. I just didn't really have soundtracks, or I wasn't terribly interested in them to be honest. And for Star Wars, I was in it for I was interested in Star Wars.
Sure.
I took the music for granted.
Why would I listen to the music when I could watch the movie?
Right. And yeah, I definitely took it for granted. Like now that I'm older and I have seen more movies and heard a lot more soundtracks, I realize how sort of special it was to take John Williams's scores for Star Wars for granted. Just like, yeah, films should sound like this, I guess. Yeah. So I just think that's interesting.
Yeah.
That we have something very important to do now, which is the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire. It's your first time answering it. So it's going to go like this. I'm going to ask you the same 3 questions that I ask every guest. And it's just for fun. So question number 1, in exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
Adventure, nostalgia, and romance. And I mean romance in like the classical, like removed from everyday life sense.
Love it. Number 2, what is something related to Star Wars music or sound that you want to learn more about?
I would love to learn more about the sound design and its coordination with the score. It's like I know some sections that we didn't talk about, weren't in these 5 minutes. There are lots of explosions that are timed exactly with the score. And that is fascinating to me. And I would love to know more about that process. What came first? The explosions and the timing of those, or the score, or did they kind of grow up together?
Oh yeah, I would be interested to know that too, especially in this sort of analog, age where it's not so easy to just like line things up and quickly shift them.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Listeners, if you have any, if we ever ask like questions on the podcast and you have like an actual like interview or something to reference, that's like, oh, they mentioned it here, please send it to me. Like, yeah, let me know. I don't mind. And I would appreciate knowing. Anyway, question number 3, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
I love Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
Nice.
That is one that I did listen to a lot through college and whatnot. Yeah.
Nice. Are you watching Rings of Power?
A lot. Not yet. I'm waiting until I have some time and I can sit down and binge. Yeah.
Understandable. Yeah. Okay, let's see. The rundown of themes from this episode, from this set of minutes, were the Imperial March vamp and the Imperial March theme. And the cues are the very end of 2M2, Ben's instructions, 2M3, Luke's rescue, 2M4, the probe scanner, beginning of it at least. And then in the soundtrack, you can find the music on various tracks, including the Wampa's Lair / Vision of Obi-Wan / Snowspeeders Take Flight. They're very elegant titles. Also Rescue from Cloud City / Hyperspace. Also the Imperial Probe Droid / Aboard the Executor. That's how you say it, right? Yeah, Executor. So many places where you can listen to things, and keep in mind that the special edition of the Empire Strikes Back soundtrack has some music that didn't make it into the film as well. So yeah, you might hear some things on those tracks that did not make it into the film. So it's just a little bonus. Anyway, where can people find you and your work online, Jennifer?
I have a website, jendharding.com. And that's Jen with 2 N's. And I'm also on Twitter using an old handle from when I was younger. My handle on Twitter is dizzyfingers42, referencing like playing violin.
Oh my gosh, that's really funny. That's really funny. Yeah, I looked up to you a lot growing up, by the way. So
Oh, I always wanted to be you.
what?
No, I had so much admiration and respect for you, and it's wonderful to see everything that you've accomplished. I'm so glad that you reached out to me and that we've been able to reconnect.
Oh my gosh, that's so wild to hear. I appreciate that so much, and also, yes, yeah, I looked up to you a lot, and
Thank you.
You know, I switched to our violin teacher after you had already been studying with her. So like I was sort of like, you know, I felt that I was like leveling up to people like you and stuff like that. And yeah,
That's very
you were
kind.
you were definitely mentioned at a lot of my lessons. So,
Oh,
yeah, you were kind of like the model of someone who practiced more than me. So, yeah, I was encouraged
goodness.
to, yeah, to do that. To be
Oh,
more
that's
like you.
hilarious. That's hilarious.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, we were stand partners at one point, and we always had plenty of pencils on the stand.
So many pencils.
So we were very responsible. Anyone could borrow a pencil if they needed one, and it was definitely a source of pride. We had those ridiculous pencil attachments that go on stands where you can hold multiple pencils per one.
And wasn't there one day when we just brought out all the pencils and completely covered the stand
I think
just
so.
to prove a
That
point?
sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were like, we're good section leaders. Look, everyone have a pencil. Have a pencil. You forgot one? Our section's not going to get in trouble for not having pencils.
No.
Yeah, it's good times. Good times.
Yep.
Anyway, on that note, thank you so much for coming on Star Wars Music Minute. And listeners, thank you for listening, of course. May the Force be with you. And talk to you next week on Star Wars Music Minute.